Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. And a lot of you are aware that I got my start in the antiques and collectibles trade at the age of 12. I started learning about these markets in literally the 1980s and the 1990s. This was the pre-internet era. And at that particular time, if you wanted to do business, you pretty much had to go to flea markets, antique marts, or you had to visit auction houses in person. There was in mailing bidding. If you don't know what that is, basically bidding by mail, like prior to an auction starting, you would actually get an auction catalog in the mail and it would have a sheet that you would rip out. You would write what items you wanted to bid on, your maximum bid amount. You would fold it up, put it in an envelope, mail it back to the auction house and hope they got it in time, and just hoped that you were possibly one of the winners on that particular items that you were bidding in. There was also, of course, phone bidding and, believe it or not, fax bidding at this particular time back in the 80s. Well, today, the antiques and collectibles trade has changed a lot, mainly the way that we do business. The internet is now a dominant force in the antiques and collectibles trade. And you also have a more mature investment element that has taken place in the antiques and collectibles trade, and where a lot of people are coming into these markets with a lot of money to either spend or invest for either the short term or the long term. Now, you guys know how I feel about this. This is really having unintended consequences for the antiques and collectibles trade by and large. It's not a bad thing, and it's not a good thing. It just is. And I want to make sure that you guys are aware of my stance on this. I myself am an investor and a collector of antiques and collectibles. Obviously, I have a passion towards these markets. So I can't criticize the amount of money that's coming into the trade in the year 2020 as we prepare to go into the year 2021. There were always markets in the antiques and collectibles trade that were hot or on fire, even back in the 1980s. You know, I told you guys before, back in the 1980s, the first major collectible that hit a boom was graded coins. Graded coins started soaring in value in the 1980s due to the advent of PCGS and companies like NGC stabilizing the marketplace by third-party grading coins for the masses. And as a result, certain investment companies like Merrill Lynch and the wonderful Athena Fund that went bankrupt towards the late 1980s came into that marketplace and they said, you know what? We can take these graded coins, we can call them investment grade collectibles, and we can package them up in fractional shares and sell them to the average consumer on Wall Street or on Main Street. Well, as a result, that's what really started the boom from an investment side of the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, ironically, back in the 1980s and the 1990s, most people were not talking about investment grade collectibles. The buzzwords that were most commonly used at your local auction center or your local antique mart or flea market were vintage, retro, antique, historic, timeless, valuable, significant, fresh to market. Shout out to any of you guys who watch American Pickers. Original, authentic, and unrestored. Most people in the 1980s on Main Street were not using the term investment grade asset or investment grade collectible. They just were not used to hearing that term being applied to the antiques and collectibles trade. Well, today, in the year 2020, going into the year 2021, all you have to do is log on to any of these high-end auction sites, any of these companies like Mythic Markets or Masterworks.io or Otis Investments or even PWCC Auctions, and you're going to come across some of these buzzwords that are pretty much merging antiques and collectibles with financial terms. Now, make no mistake, this is being done on purpose. What a lot of these companies are doing, and again, this is no discrediting any of these companies. I'm not trying to do that. What I am trying to alert you guys to, though, is that there's a lot of marketers behind the scenes that are starting to use terms like investment grade assets or unregistered assets or culturally significant. These terms are being used to get at your subconscious so you start looking at these items instead of just a collectible nature as an investment nature. So there is a reason why a lot of these financial firms, and that's really what they are, these firms are not collectible firms. Make no mistake, guys. These firms are financial firms operating as collectible brokers and dealers. But be aware, these markets are being manipulated as a result. Now, where am I going with this? Well, there's 5 terms that I want to bring to your attention in the year 2020 as we prepare to enter the year 2021 that are being used by a lot of these market makers, market manipulators, and financiers who are coming into the antiques and collectibles trade. We are no longer utilizing terms like vintage or retro or antique or historic or timeless or valuable or significant. No, now we have to use terms like cultural asset or collectible asset or culturally significant. So I wanted to do this video just to let you guys know what these terms mean. Now, some of these terms I have gone into great lengths to explain on this channel. For instance, the first term I'm going to talk about today is investment grade collectible. This originated out of the coin collecting and investing community when Wall Street firms sought to sell investors shares of funds that invested in graded coins and the like. Much like investment grade bonds, investors were attracted to the term investment grade coin. The term then became hot again when third-party grading of comic books became a thing in the early 2000s. This is why, if you look on some of these comic book dealer sites, or even if you log on to the CGC graded comic book forum, you're going to come across somebody who is going to state, I'm looking to invest in this particular comic book, or I want to go after this investment grade comic book. Ironically, when the term investment grade comic book was first used in the early 2000s, you know a lot of people could not stomach it. There were actually posts on collecting forums where people would laugh at other people using that term. Today, in the year 2020, guess what? It's commonplace to hear people talk about comic books as being of investment grade. You have wonderful Wall Street and coin grading to thank for that, along with the masses latching on to third-party grading, thinking that because an item is encased in plastic, therefore it is authentic and or more liquid. Well, as a result, there's a lot of people that like the term investment grade. Now, the term investment grade really is just defined as a collectible that is highly desirable in the marketplace and also in the top 15% of the highest graded examples known. For instance, let me use this as an example, and this is an example I always use, talking about comic books. A giant size X-Men 1 in CGC 9.4, 9.6, that is an investment grade comic book. In 9.2, that comic book is not investment grade. Now, it is still desirable in 9.2 condition. You can put it on eBay, you can consign it to Heritage. If the market equilibrium price is met, that item will sell and transfer of ownership will take place and you will get a check for the sale of that item. It is a key issue comic book. I am not disputing that. But what I am saying is, for something to be truly investment grade, it must be in the top 15% of the highest graded examples known. There are too many copies of giant size X-Men 1 out there in near mint or near mint plus condition for a 9.2 certified copy to be considered investment grade. So that's something that you got to understand. It doesn't mean that the item is not desirable. It doesn't mean that the item's less valuable. It just means that in order to be considered investment grade, it has to be in the top 15% of the highest graded examples known. Please note that. That is very important, especially when you get to more mature and established markets like graded coins. If you mention an item is an investment grade in coin collecting, there are certain elitist dealers out there, I know this firsthand because I work with a lot of these guys, that will correct you if that coin is not in the top 15% of highest graded examples when you are referring to it as such. Now, I know certain coin collectors out there, they don't look at it that strictly, but other coin collectors and investors do. So that's why that particular term has provenance. Well, now, today, we have Timmys, Poindexters, Kimmies, and unsophisticated investors that are coming into a lot of these markets, and they want to refer to Pokemon cards as being of quote-unquote investment grade, or Magic the Gathering cards, or vintage video games, or great at video games, or great at toys. Now, to be fair, I don't have a problem with that, guys. My problem is, just understand, it is a marketing ploy to get you to think of, rather than these items as collectible, they want you to think of these items as investable. If I can get you to think of these two coins here as being investable assets, you will pay a premium to get them. It's much easier for me to manipulate the market if you already consider this 1908 $20 gold piece as an investment. So that's something that you got to understand. So we're going to move on. The second term I want to talk about that has just really become a buzzword in the last few years, especially with the rise of cryptocurrency, is that of an unregistered asset. Now, an unregistered asset really came out of the commodities and precious metals marketplace. A lot of people are not aware of this. There's certain investors out there, and there's also certain criminals out there that need to hide money and assets. Well, the term unregistered asset is something that appeals to them, because if you have a brokerage account, if you own stock, if you own corporate bonds, if you own a mutual fund, if you own an index fund, whatever financial asset you have, chances are that asset is being stored in a brokerage account, either through Vanguard, Robinhood, E-Trade, Merrill Lynch, T. Rowe Price, Charles Schwab, one of those companies. Well, as a result, that item is considered a registered asset, meaning it is linked directly to your Social Security number. So let me use this as an example. This 1920S MS64 Plus PCGS CAC graded coin that I'm holding up here. This is a $5,000 coin, roughly, guys, by the way. This coin that I'm holding up here, this coin is not attached to my Social Security number. This coin resides in this box, which resides in my safety deposit box. So as a result, nobody needs to know that I own this particular coin. Of course, they do now because I'm doing a YouTube video on it. But regularly, this coin would not be attached to me in any way, where if I get sued, something happens to me, I marry the wrong woman, and she divorces me, this asset is somewhat protected, because if they don't know it exists, guess what? They can't take it from me. Now, I'm using that as an extreme example, but that is why certain people are attracted to what is known as unregistered assets. Well, ironically, this again came out of the precious metal and commodities trade. Well, there's a lot of people in the antiques and collectibles trade that use it as a buzzword to attract certain people to put their money in some of these assets. Cryptocurrency in its purest form is an example of an unregistered asset. That's why it's so popular. So is gold bullion. Gold bullion is a prime example of an unregistered asset in its purest form. So that's why people invest in these markets. Well, today, you have a lot of dealers and a lot of unscrupulous people operating in the trade that are selling these items as unregistered assets. You too can protect your future and your net worth by buying items like this that nobody knows that you own. They're private, portable, and able to be stashed in a safety deposit box, a home safe, or the like. So there are people that are attracted to these markets as a result. Unregistered asset is another term that was never used back in the 80s and 90s. It just wasn't a buzzword in the antiques and collectibles trade. Moving forward, we have to bring up one of my all-time favorite words, culturally significant. Now, if you log on to a lot of these companies out there that are selling you fractional shares of Nike sneakers or Pokemon cards or comic books or pieces of art, you're going to come across the term culturally significant. The definition of a culturally significant item is an item that has value and provenance due to how it is perceived in a given time period by a culture. Most culturally significant artifacts can become less culturally significant over time. That's in the fine print that they don't tell you. A historically significant artifact is much more coveted than a culturally significant artifact because culture changes. History does not. So for instance, if we're going to talk about an ancient coin that was maybe minted when Julius Caesar reigned over Rome, that particular coin would have historical significance. A pair of Nike Air sneakers from the 1990s. I know some of you guys are going to hate me from talking about this, but guess what? They're culturally significant. We don't know how those Nike Air sneakers are going to be viewed from a cultural standpoint 100 years into the future, or even 50 years into the future, or even 20 years into the future. So the value of that asset can change due to how it's perceived. Well, on a lot of these forums, on a lot of these quote-unquote investment sites that are really geared towards antiques and collectibles, when somebody hears the term culturally significant, it excites you. It makes you want to invest in that asset because it has cultural provenance. You want to put your money into that item because it gives the allure or the illusion that that item is going to turn a profit for you over the short term or over the long term. Now, this kind of ties in with another term I'm going to talk about really quick, which is number 4 on our list, and this is collectible asset. Now, for those unaware, a collectible asset is something that is both collectible and has a store of value. Store of value does not always equate to something being a great investment. You must understand this, guys. Just because something is collectible does not mean it is also investable. Those are two different words. They're two different topics. I'm going to be doing a full-length video on that particular topic alone because I can see in the comment section of a lot of my videos, a lot of people get this mixed up. But if you log on to a lot of these sites that deal in fractional shares, commodities, geared towards the antiques and collectibles trade, you will see this term come up a lot. Collectible asset. Now, that is also different from a safe haven asset and a collectible investment, as I just stated. More on that in another video. The last buzzword that we have to talk about, and this is really taking the market by storm, cultural asset. I have no idea where this term came out of, other than the fact that it is a new buzzword in the antiques and collectibles trade, and all is what it means is an item that is both culturally significant and one that is in demand in the collectibles marketplace. So a cultural asset is simply an item that is currently cultural significant. Remember, that can change over time, but it is also one that is in demand on the collectibles marketplace. All cultural assets are also culturally significant. Cultural asset is one of the newest buzzwords in the antiques and collectibles trade. And I'm going to be honest, guys, it drives me crazy. There are too many market manipulators, too many marketeers coming into these markets, coming up with all these buzzwords. It's making my head spin. But I'm going to repeat all 5 of these buzzwords for you. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to close your eyes while I just repeat these 5 words. And I want you to let me know in the comment section below what visions you are getting in your head. Because what these terms are supposed to do is they're supposed to elicit visions of money, investment, money being made, profit taking, and the like. So let's see how they work. First term, investment grade collectible. What vision do you have as you close your eyes and you vision that term? I guarantee you, you are seeing something of value in your head right now. The next term, unregistered asset. Sounds really advanced, doesn't it? Ironically, your latest box of any Magic the Gathering product or Pokemon product can be considered an unregistered asset, guys. It doesn't have to be something that's extremely valuable in the collectibles marketplace. Next term, culturally significant. That sounds really great, doesn't it? Well, when you break it down and you analyze it, guess what? It doesn't matter that much because we don't know what's going to be considered culturally significant tomorrow, and if the item that we're talking about today is even going to be valued in that same manner tomorrow. Next term, collectible asset. Now, there is always a term that brings upon visions of dollar signs in one's head. Collectible asset, you can't get more monetary than that aside from investment grade collectible. And the last term that I want to bring to your attention, again, cultural asset. Do you see how a lot of these companies are marketing their products to the unsophisticated investor out there to get them to part with their money because they want them to believe that these items are going to be the next big thing? And by the way, some of these items are going to be the next big thing. More on that in a next upcoming video. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.